Welcome back to the Goddesses of Social Work podcast, where we lift up the stories, strategies, and soulful journeys of social workers making an extraordinary impact. This episode is part of our SWAG Award series, celebrating the values of service, wellness, advocacy, and growth, a movement founded by the incredible Sharice Nance to honor social workers who embody these values and who lead with passion, purpose, and integrity. In this series, we're shining a light on SWAG honorees who are changing lives and shaping the future of our profession. Today, I'm honored to sit down with Dr. Sheila Gillespie Roth, a trailblazing licensed clinical social worker, educator, and researcher who has dedicated her career to supporting first responders. From her early days as a medical social worker to her leadership as a founding member and chair of Carlow University's BSW and MSW programs, and now through her private practice, Roth Consulting, Dr. Roth has devoted decades to helping first responders navigate trauma, stress, and healing. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Roth.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're so glad you're here. I, love starting our podcast. Usually I go straight to the bio and say, "Ooh, what a great bio." Your bio. I think I emailed you last night and was like, "Oh my gosh, your bio is amazing." But instead of going straight to the bio and saying, "Wow," and pulling something out of there, I really want to know, what is bringing you joy these days?
Wow. So, always joy comes from my husband and my son, my family and my two dogs. But also, my husband and I, we're both recently this practice is my retirement job, but we both kind of are starting to travel a little bit, doing some photography travel. And we just enjoy so much being present in a lot of the national parks, a lot of places around the world, even where we can just take photos and be in the moment, appreciate beauty, in everyday things. So all of that, I would say I'm just enjoying life right now.
Oh my. You know what? I'm like, oh yes. I'm sitting there with you with that energy. Because we were just talking before we hit record. You starting programs, you started two programs being founding member. And I hope we get into that. I know how much work it takes to do that. Also, even though private practice is your retirement job, it's still a lot of hard work. And so to hear you say that you are going to national parks and being present in the beauty of this planet, that's like we all are just, that's where we're all reaching to. And
Yeah, it's a gift. It's a gift and it's a blessing. And I highly recommend it for anyone who feels like they need a break, because we forget how much more there is in this world than our own circle of worries and work, So
Yes.
get you outside of yourself. And I just think nature's an amazing healer.
I agree. You know what? I had this epiphany this week, Dr. Roth. I started walking again. I love walking, and it helps to regulate my central nervous system. We talk to our clients a lot about journaling and walking, and so I talk to my supervisees. The reason imposter syndrome comes up is because you're not doing the thing you're telling people to do.
Yes.
So
I think
I
you're
try.
right. That we all
Yeah.
do that sometimes.
So I try to do the thing I'm telling people to do. And so I had started walking a couple of years ago and even started doing 5Ks or whatever. So then I joined the
Wow.
gym and really got into going to the gym. And then about a month ago, I just stopped and I realized it's, it's, it was the walking in nature that I enjoyed, not necessarily the walking in gyms where I get overstimulated and I'm making up stories about people because I'm a social worker and I'm
That's so funny.
watching their relationships and I'm not disconnecting from the work. And so going back out and walking in nature has been, again, helped to regulate my central nervous system. And I guess I'm just wondering, like, what is your favorite moment in nature? What's your favorite national park to go to? Like,
Well,
yeah.
I have to tell you, I mean, I
Yes.
love them all. I really do.
Mm.
But we truly were blessed this past year. On my husband's bucket list was to go to South Africa on safari, a photography safari. And it changed my life because I was like, I don't want to go. I Googled it and there were 20 poisonous snakes. And I was scared to death. But we went in there winter time, which was still beautiful, and there weren't any around. So, but I have to tell you, we went to Kruger National Park and it was amazing. I mean, to look around and drive down the road and have an elephant or a giraffe or a lion walk across the road and not really care that you're there because they're just in their place. And it was so enlightening to me that, there's so much in the world that is beautiful, and that we need to see the world, because when you stay kind of in your own little space, not really, going to visit. I mean, we have beautiful national parks in the US too. We've been to so many, my husband and I have been to many of them. You don't realize, like, it's not just about me, right? I mean, there's so much more. And if you open yourself, then you really do open your mind and your body to healing, I think, too. So it's a healing thing for me to go.
It sounds so beautiful. I'm thinking my little nature walks have dragonflies, butterflies, and hummingbirds.
We
You're
have,
literally talking about lion, tigers, and bears.
but on all the other ones, I love. There's nothing more beautiful than a dragonfly and or a
Mm,
hummingbird. So they're
hmm.
all beautiful. It's just a different experience.
It is. I can't. I'm putting myself there.
Oh, you
And if
have to do it.
yes, I'm putting myself there through your eyes and through your lenses, and I'm super excited. Thank you for sharing that with us. That brought me joy as well just now. Dr. Roth, I'm going to, our first question, and one of the reasons I started the social work, Guys in Social Work podcast was because I love hearing about the journeys of social workers. And you have built a remarkable career supporting first responders through therapy, education, and research. What initially drew you to this profession and to this focus of, working with first responders, and how has it shaped your path as both a clinician and an educator?
So my path is interesting. I come from a family that is mostly first responders or healthcare workers. So a lot of firefighters, paramedics in my background, and I had an uncle actually who was a state trooper. But and my growing up, my mom babysat to help make money, because back in the day we came from a small town. Firefighters in those smaller departments don't make a whole lot of money. And so my mom would babysit, and I would notice, as I was like in sort of like elementary school, middle school, high school, um, a lot of the families that were coming were struggling in one way or another. And um, even, she had a lot of single parents bringing their child for childcare. So in doing that, and I would watch my mom sit and talk. She would have coffee pot going at 6 a.m. every morning for the moms. And I would watch her talk with people and engage with them, and they would feel so much better when they left our house. And even that, my mom had a high school education. She wasn't a social worker, but she was in heart, I believe. And also seeing my father come home from fires, and some of the things that he endured, made me very aware of the family side, the lived experience of a first responder. So, going through my careers, I sat down one time. I knew I wanted to go to college. I knew I wanted to be in the helping profession. And just like, you and I talked earlier, like I really wasn't sure what a social worker was, but I saw social work, I saw psychology. And when I was reading the college catalogs and I saw the difference between the two, while I thought they were both interesting, social work called me. And it called me because of the person and environment focus. I wasn't just out to give someone, an assessment and diagnose them and treat them, I actually was looking at who is this person holistically and how does that all play a role in what's happening in their life. So that really intrigued me. So I went on to get my BSW at the University of Pittsburgh. I got my MSW at the University of Pittsburgh. And I've been in Pittsburgh, besides the little town I grew up in south of here, my whole life, actually. And I got my first social work position after the MSW in a small community hospital. And I then, about a year and a half later, took the job at a level 1 trauma center in the city that was just starting to hire social workers for that role. So it was me and another social worker working nights and weekends in the ER. And that changed my world. It changed my world because as a social worker, especially in emergency department, you are part of that team. So you show up at every trauma, you're consulted on all the social kind of situations you can imagine that come through the door. And so I really was exposed to, traumas as they're happening, talking to families after the worst day in their life, working with families and kids, and just, it was such a wealth of experience, and working very closely with EMS. So they would come in, bring a patient, and if the person was unconscious, we'd have to identify them. And EMS, where'd you pick them up? We'd work together as a team. So that kind of then sort of fed the idea of first responders and what they go through and how much they care often. And then from there, I took a role from that position. I actually stayed in that position until I was about 8 months pregnant with my son. A lot of life had happened in between. And I then left and was offered the opportunity to develop the BSW at Carlow University. So I did that, and then it was turned into the MSW. And all the while, you can see where my twist and turns towards first responders went. I also joined a crisis team because crisis and trauma were always my interests, and that's an area I always worked in. And so that crisis team, we worked with first responders after critical incidents, and that was a voluntary team. I'm still on that team. I've been on it for over 35 years. But you train with first responders and mental health providers. They all go through the same training. And then you're all volunteer, but you're called out after critical incidents if the person wants to talk to you. So that really started down that road. And then from there, I was at the university for over 30 years. I retired from there, took a part-time role with the city, working with their peer teams, police, fire, and EMS peer teams, to try and help do education with them and work with people again after difficult calls. And so from there, I developed, once I retired, my private practice. And I used to teach about working with this population because they truly do have a culture, And so from there, I decided that's my focus, and I often do it. I do it because I love it. I also became an EMT along the road because I thought, I need to feel what it's like to be in the back of that ambulance, and so I still am an EMT, but I don't work as one anymore. I volunteered for a while, but I dedicate this work to my father. Because he died when I was 25, so he never got to see me finish my work, and so I often I dedicate what I do to him. So I know that's a long way around.
No, that is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story. What's your dad's name?
Jack.
Jack. Yeah, we dedicate this episode to him as well.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. I want to get into. I have 3 questions, maybe more, but how did you, at such a young age, here you are, because and you've been in academia, and I'm wondering, even your perspective on this. I know in academia we can play so many different roles, including advisor when students are coming in trying to decide their major. But here you are, 18, 19 years old, going into your first years in figuring out what your major is going to be, psychology versus social work. And psychology is always so popular because, it's just the more popular uh, major. But also, what I've learned, and I'm sure you know this, is you got to really go all the way through to doctorate to do
Yes.
something with that psychology degree. But with social work, and I know in Alabama, I don't know if it's the same way in Philadelphia. With the BSW, you can get licensed at the BSW level.
You can.
Yeah, you can do
And
something with that.
yeah, and you can clinically practice with your master's as long as you have a
Exactly.
license. So
Exactly. How did you, but you talk about what really being intentional about looking at what psychology did and being intentional looking at social work did. And reason I'm coming back to this is because we have a lot of students who listen to this podcast, because I have, friends who are still teaching and they share the podcast with the students. How did you at such a young age know that there was this difference? And I know you said it was the in-person environment, but really speak to, how did you know that there was this difference?
well, I kept looking at college catalogs and I knew I had to go, somewhere close to home, right? So, um, but everything I read talked about how social work looked at people, who they were living with, how their life was, what were some of the environmental factors. And I think it struck home with me because I saw it live out in our house, with our own family, but two, I saw it with all the people that were bringing their kids to be babysat while they went to work, and talking with my mother. And I was thinking, well, I don't know, if people, if they would have a diagnosis or not, but I could tell you one thing. If they were able to have childcare that was affordable, which my mom was really affordable, she charged $5 a day. But back in the day, I guess that was, okay. But I mean, there were other things that impact people's lives. And so I saw that play out all the time. And for me, they just spoke to me. And I thought, that's what I want to do.
I love it. That's so beautiful. But then, okay, so you get your BSW, you choose social work over psychology, you get your BSW. I'm always curious because I got my BSW and then went straight, literally hadn't even graduated from my BSW. They do it different now. We've been doing this a long time. Hadn't graduated from my BSW and went straight into my MSW advanced standing. You
Yeah, I
know,
did the same
you
thing.
do, yeah, they don't do it like that anymore, but
Yeah.
how did
But
you? Uh-huh.
I'm
Go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm curious. Yes. How did you know? Because I had a professor say you need to get your MSW. I think for me, I just like, okay, I got my degree. Let me go do this. But that, Dr. Ike Burson, I'll never forget, said you need to get your MSW. How did you know to get your MSW?
I knew I wanted to work in healthcare. So I did an undergraduate internship at Mercy Hospital, which is where I ended up working. Um, and I did it in an outpatient clinic. And I had an amazing, amazing mentor in that role. And a shout out to her. Now she's now since died, but her name was Thelma Lovett, well known in the Pittsburgh community. She was such a respected person, and she taught me so much. And I really learned to love the healthcare environment in working with her. And she used to say to me, well, Miss Gillespie, if you want to work in the hospital, you got to get your master's degree. So that kind of helped me because I had no one in my family who could guide me. No one had been there. So I went ahead and I thought, well, I can go with advanced standing, so I might as well just keep on going. So I took out loans and I got my MSW, and I worked in a small community hospital for about a year and a half. And then the position opened up at Mercy in the ER. And I actually called my old BSW field instructor and I said, do you know anything about this job? And she said, I do, and you should apply for it. So, that really helped me. And I applied for it. And I was one of two people who took the job. because it was not quite full time. So we had no health insurance, but we were 30 hours a week. But it was good because I was then taking one class towards a PhD. I wanted to see if I liked it. So I went to
And
school. Yeah.
and yeah, that's where my next, because you didn't mention that in your journey. Like, okay, you got your MSW and now you're working. How did you know? Because PhD means you're going to teach, you're going to do research. How did you know
Um,
that that was your next steps?
honestly, so my PhD is in education.
Ah,
It's in higher education. So college, the old degree name used to be college teaching, but they changed it to administrative and policy studies by the time I graduated. So I worked full time and did the PhD part time. It took me 6 years to get it. So when I work clinically, and this is important for people to know, I work on my master's license. Okay, so that's the thing. If I wouldn't need that PhD, right, for the clinical work that I do. And so what I did was I decided, I liked learning. I was always that always, interested me. So I went ahead and I looked at social work in our local area, but it was more research based and I wanted clinical. So I thought, well, if I wanted to teach, maybe that's the way to go and I can still practice on my clinical license. So that's what I did. And, I mean, I ended up being a professor for 30 years, plus having a small part-time, work with first responders as a practice. So it worked out well, and it gave me a lot of diversity in what I was able to do with my degrees.
it absolutely, it absolutely did. And I want to, we're going to get into you. My next question is about your work with first responders group, and I'm kind of pivoting of how I'm asking it. How I told you I was gonna, but I am. I'm reading right now the Guys of Social Work, our book club that we meet every couple of months. We're reading "What Happened to You" by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry, and the chapter I just was reading while I was walking. I'm listening to it anyway. Dr. Bruce Perry talks about, he doesn't say first responders, but basically first responders and them having a different reaction to a fire or an emergency than a first grader or a fifth grader being in the fire and or witnessing it. And so when we were talking about through Roth Consulting, you're able to blend clinical work with educational consulting and training for first responder groups and how these pieces come together in your work. And I told you in our supervised C supervision groups, we're talking about PTSD, acute stress, adjustment disorder. We're all in the midst of all of that goodness right now. Is your clinical work tied into your educational work with these first responders and in the stress, the acute stress that they carry?
Mhm. So, I because I've taught for such a long time, I'm very comfortable in the teachings, classroom setting, right? So what's interesting is if you marry my clinical background of trauma and crisis materials to teaching, it works so perfectly because I actually do quite a bit of education with people in EMS, like when they're learning to become paramedics, in the police academy about, when they're learning to be an officer and they don't realize this work comes home with them. And I also do it with the fire peer teams. So I have a course that I developed. It's called The Impact of Trauma. And what I do is I give that to demonstrate to these folks that their training, I always describe it this way: their training in their respective fields helps them to build something that I call invisible emotional body armor. And they have to wear that when they go to work. They have to wear it because if they absorbed on the job everything that they were seeing and doing, they wouldn't be able to function. So this invisible emotional body armor goes on when they put their uniform on, I always tell them. But the problem is, it is very difficult to get off. So even when they go home, They might be able to lower the window on it this much, but that impacts family life. And so, I mean, I could talk for days on, that topic, but if you think about, in the course that I teach, and it's such a great combination of my skills, I actually create I have a fake case, and I have first responders showing up to the scene. And then I say to them, let's check in 3 days later to see how those first responders are doing. And in those first responders, I build in some of the signs and symptoms of acute stress disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and adjustment disorder. And I'll say to people, does it look like this person has PTSD? Yeah, but guess what? It's only been 3 days. And so they learn about then PTSD is something that could happen, but more likely it's one of these other ones, these other three. And what's so helpful for me is afterwards, almost every time I teach this, is somebody will say, oh my goodness, I thought you were describing me. Or, I didn't realize that this was like something that happens to us. So, what I think about is like, if you think about the physical challenges of being a first responder, there's hazardous environments that they work in, right? Fires, floods, chemical spills, crime scenes, all kinds of physical weather. And then you add in things like fatigue and sleep deprivation. Right now we see shortages of people going into these lines of work. And because of that, they have long shifts. They're forced to work overtime sometimes. Risk of injury, just by the nature of the job itself. But even like, and I think about like EMS, like lifting injuries, stretchers and equipment, and a lot of musculoskeletal injuries. And that's not even to the emotional aspect yet, So you look at the emotional of moral injury. Like I had somebody just in my office this week who was talking about a call he went on and got in the house, and there were 3 little kids in a really bad situation, and how he has a child at home that age. And that's the other piece I always teach, is that the more a call looks like your life, the more it impacts your emotional body armor. It sneaks in. And then they start to question, is there something wrong with me? Why is this call bothering me? Not other ones as much. And so there's so much that goes into it. And I think that, so thinking about mental health, there are resources. Like we have the peer teams that we've just built over the last, I've been doing this work for over 30 years. And I'd say in the last 10, 15, we've started to build in peer teams. We also have like people I know in our area who are clinicians who we know understand the first responder work and culture. I've had first responders say to me, I'll say, have you ever talked to a therapist before? And they'll say, I did, but when I told her the story or him the story, they started to cry. And they were like, oh my God, like they felt like they had horrified the therapist. And so I think it takes a therapist who knows trauma, but not only that, but who understands the first responder culture, like what they see, because you're going to hear it, and that's where your own self-care has to be really up in the scale of importance.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I know that was a lot to.
Dr. Roth, that was amazing. And I want to just pause and say thank you for the work that you're doing.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you
you.
for the work that you're doing. You know what? I've been doing this a long time. One of the things I'm loving about getting to do this podcast is like, man, I didn't even think about first responders needing a social worker or a therapist, and having somebody to hold space for them until this very moment when you're talking. I'm like, of course they do.
A
Of
lot of
course they do.
It's so common that a lot of people don't
Mhm.
realize that. But again, because what people are seeing on calls or on scene is a first responder with their emotional body armor intact. And it doesn't hit them usually until they're home on a day off. Because remember, they see more trauma in a day than many people might see in a lifetime. you know. And so, yeah, it takes a while. And then when their brain quiets down just enough, I call it the gerbil wheel. The gerbil wheel of replaying the call starts over and over. And it can be challenging for them.
And you know what? I wrote that down because that is great. You should trademark or copyright or whatever it's called. The invisible emotional body armor. That is a great term. And yes, obviously with first responders, but I was also thinking I bet social workers do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My practice is focused on first responders, but I also do some work with some of the outreach teams, outreach workers,
Mhm.
and crisis workers. So a lot of them are social workers. Yeah.
And I guess, without giving your program away, it's I'm like everybody needs to contact you, Dr. Roth. But what are some ways that you suggest, maybe one or two that help us to raise our invisible emotional body armor when we're with our families and friends and not during our 8 to 5 or 9 to 5?
Right. So you want to have it up, right, and on when you're at your 9 to 5 or your work, right? When you want to lower it a little and let some of your own life in is when you're home. And how you do that, and this is what I say to my first responders all the time, it's the same with social workers. You walk in two worlds. One of those worlds is your job. And as social workers, we don't walk in the prettiest of worlds. We're not selling beautiful jewelry or clothing. We are working in some of the really hard emotional environments and some of the very same things that I described that first responders work in, you know? And so when you come home, um, it is not easy to turn that off. And what happens is it robs you of your family time because you're home and now you're worrying about that client, or now you're worrying about the conditions that they were living in, right? So, how do you package that so that you can now walk in your other world, which is truly your life? That's where you live. That is you and your family, and so it's so important to practice living that life. And that's where your self-care comes in. The walks that you take are a great example of that. Spending time with family, putting something on the calendar for next week and say, hey, a new movie's coming out or a new restaurant opened. We're going. And to make a definitive time that's family and to really start to separate work life, home life. It's not impossible, but it's not possible to do it perfectly either. Work is always going to probably try to consume more of us. And so I always say it's not necessarily a work-life balance. It's more of managing the two worlds that we walk in simultaneously as
I,
best we can.
I love that. I love that. And I even want to add, doing some of those micro practices during your workday, like getting up and going and washing your hands. At the end of the day, if there's a badge or a jacket that you wear to work, the first responders have a uniform
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
literally peel off. Social workers washing away the day, if that's possible, or taking your badge and letting it be in your mind that, okay, this is separate. I'm taking this off and now I'm stepping into this world.
Actually tell a lot of my first responders, and this would work for our social workers too, is at the
Hmm.
end of the day, have a conversation with your family who you're going home to. I'm going to start doing this as a part of self-care, a part of washing it away. And I actually tell them, go get in the shower for 5 minutes and imagine, like do some sensory work, right? Imagine the sight, the sound, the smell of the soap. Just real quick, just rinse it away and say to your kids, I am going to go upstairs and take a real quick shower because I'm stinky or sweaty or whatever. And when I come down, I want you to have a book ready for me to read. So slip into your life, or let's go outside and, whatever, walk in the yard or whatever it might be, but to actually have a routine for transition to home.
I completely agree. I talk to my people about that all the time. I will even include if you even have a playlist that you're playing in the car that helps transition your day. But going ahead, it's almost like how we talk to our clients about sleep hygiene. and
Yes.
winding yourself down to prepare your mind and your body to rest. It feels the same way of taking off this invisible emotional body armor. I really think you need to trademark that because I'm going to be using it. And I'm going to give you credit, Dr.
But
Sheila Roth.
you know what,
I
though, it's
promise I'm going to give you credit, but I'm definitely going to be using that. Before I move on to my next question, I want to ask you because I didn't know this because it wasn't in your bio, but you said you also became an EMT.
did, yes.
EMT. Okay. A lot of people think once you are in this career, social work, this is all you could do. I
Yeah.
love that you became an EMT. You had the second piece of you. I know you want to know what it was like, but can you speak to social workers who may be listening about doing that other thing as well and how you can bring both of those worlds together?
I can tell you if there's anybody listening who's thinking they may want to work with first responders, that was the best thing I ever did for myself. Because, even though I grew up in a family that was first responders, there is nothing that can replace learning that information. First of all, it helped me to really get my history taking down, because here's the thing: the training in EMS is very precise, right? There's a yes or a no, correct? Where social work, we sort of think in areas of gray, right? Well, it could be this, it could be that. Let's talk about this. Let's look at all the sides. Very different ways of thinking. So it made me stretch my brain in a different way. The other thing it did was got me in the back of an ambulance and got me in people's homes in a different way. And so what I found often was, they would say, Sheila, on our ride back to the hospital, I'm going to have you be in the back with us because you're so good in talking to people. Like people would just open up and talk. Like, how you have that invisible social work stenciled on your forehead, even in the grocery store. So, and I was really, good at calming people down because of my social work skills. And now in this practice, I really have much more understanding. I don't know certainly what a paramedic knows or what a nurse or a doctor knows, but I have a better basic understanding of physiology and all of the things and how the mind and body kind of click together. And I'll tell you, I absolutely loved it. And it's not for everybody, but what I would say is that it changed my life and also gave me street credit, because people would be like, oh yeah, I know her, I've seen her at the hospital, or she's an EMT. And so it really did give me a little bit more street credit with working with first responders. I think if you don't want to become an EMT, and you certainly don't have to, there are first responder courses, like they'll give you CPR, stop the bleed, those kinds of things, which would really be good. Ride-alongs, you can contact your local fire department, paramedic, units, police department, say, hey, could I do a ride-along? Those are very helpful. And first responders really respect that you took the interest and the initiative to try and learn more about it. And the other thing that was amazing for me, and my EMT helped with this as well, was I joined the critical incident stress team, that crisis team that we spoke about, so that when a call out went out, I could go out as a mental health provider, but I could also go out as an EMT, as a peer. So it's there's a lot of ways that you can gain that experience.
I am just in awe. I'm just in awe, and I'm so glad that our audience is getting to listen to this because again, I didn't even know, and then hearing you talk about how to your skills as a social worker, but then also taking on those skills as an EMT and blending those two things. Of course, you have Roth Consulting. Of course, you do. But before we move on, I loved how you were talking about because obviously right now we're in that energy in our supervisee group, but the adjustment disorder, acute stress disorder, and PTSD, and how visiting them 3 months later, visiting them 6 months later, oh, it's not PTSD, and even talking about the 3 day, 6 month later periods. What can we put into place? I'm sure you do that. What can you put into place so it doesn't turn into the PTSD? I love that you're doing that. But, you've already talked to us about the fact that first responders face unique and intense challenges that a lot of people will never witness. What patterns or themes are you seeing emerge in your work with them, and how can we social workers best support this community?
I would say I see a lot of adjustment disorder. And, just basically what I think of it as adjustment disorder is the work came home. And because of that, there's maybe difficulties at home, or you're having trouble, getting through a situation that maybe you witnessed or were part of, but not to the extent of an acute stress disorder. So it's like, divorces, separations, self-medication with alcohol, things like that. Or just like, compassion fatigue, like, I'm exhausted. I don't know how I can give anymore. I don't know if I have anything else to give. Well, it's because you haven't been given back to yourself. So I really see a lot of that. I see acute stress reactions after critical incidents for sure. Um, but what I try to do is to normalize that, hey, you're a normal person who just saw something horrific, right? And so let's look at that. And we often I do EMDR, which is a type of trauma therapy. And I also am trained in a type of CBT, which is called Unified Protocol. And a colleague and he was from the University of Pittsburgh. The Center for Emergency Medicine is where I did my early counseling for paramedics. But we did a study with another couple people, and we gave free counseling to any first responder in the state of Pennsylvania using Unified Protocol. And it treats anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And so we did that for about a year. And we actually just published a paper about that. Great success with lowering levels of anxiety, depression, and PTSD in people that were in the study. So I use that, and I use parts of it. It includes things like mindfulness. It includes present focused work, cognitive flexibility, like rethinking, what was my role in this situation? Like, they don't carry crystal balls, just like social workers don't carry crystal balls, right? So why was I there? And when I was there, did I show up? Did I do the best I could do, even though it was a really bad situation? So that cognitive flexibility, thinking about awareness of emotion, like, what role does frustration play? What role does anger, the anger iceberg? What's under the anger? Sadness, fear, frustration? So doing a lot of education around what they're experiencing is how we kind of work through a lot of that. And of course, EMDR if needed.
That's great. And will you share the link to your papers that we can put in the podcast
Oh,
description? Is it?
yes.
Yeah.
I can do that. Yeah, I'm not very technologically savvy, but I'll do my best.
No, all you have to do is send me the link and I'll do
Send
the
it to you.
rest.
Okay. Okay.
And
Yes.
I will do the rest. And thank you. And that's one of the things we've been talking about is EMDR, and we're going to get into the, like, on our final question, trainings and mindsets that you're going to suggest, but EMDR being one, it makes perfect sense that you are trained in that modality doing this particular work. And so um we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But I want to pivot a little bit because this work that you have done, all this work that you have done, led to you receiving a SWAG award. And we mentioned in our intro that the SWAG awards were created by Sharice Nance, and they celebrate social workers who embody service, wellness, advocacy, and growth. How did it feel to be honored as a SWAG award recipient? And what did that recognition mean to you personally and professionally?
Oh my goodness. Well,
Mm,
when I first was notified that I was I won a SWAG award, I wasn't even aware of, like, what a swag award was. And I was like, I have to look this up and see. And I was so amazed and I honored. And honestly, of anything I've ever gone through in my life, I think like that just blew me away, because to be honored by your own profession and to be honored by your own people that you know and work with is such an amazing gift. And I was thrilled. And I told Charisse at the event, it was all social workers, and it was people who knew what we do. And I've never felt so appreciated in my life, because, social workers don't get a lot of appreciation. So it was truly fantastic. It was an amazing experience.
I love that. And I looking it up, I went looking for all the articles and the website, and we'll make sure that we put a link to the swag award so people can get to know what it is, because it is one of the rare places that social workers are being honored, and it is in Philadelphia. It's for Philadelphia social workers. And the thing
Pittsburgh.
is, Pittsburgh particularly, but the thing is, you have to be nominated.
That was the
So
shocking.
yeah, you don't nominate yourself. Somebody nominates you. So some random person. I don't know. Did you ever find out who nominated you?
I
Or
ended up finding out. It was actually so interesting. It was two people from one agency that I've done a little bit of work with, and it was two other people. And then I talked to a person who used to work with me at another job, and she nominated me. So I was like, oh my God. I thought I was worried. I thought, I know I'm getting old, but am I dying? Like, where is
am I getting the lifetime award?
that's what it felt like. Oh my God. Almost like a thank you for the culmination of all the work we do, It was it
It
was a
is. It is a thank you. And I was thinking about you last night, Dr. Roth, and and I say this on the podcast all the time. I say a little prayer before I hit record, because I always thank the goddesses of social work who came before us and paved the way. I just feel like those women and some men who came, we wouldn't be able to just do this had they not. And I thought about you last night, after reading your bio again and getting excited about getting to record this. You are one of those goddesses who came and
oh,
paved the way for us to do this. And so for you to get this recognition, I think is just so appropriate. And I would like to just challenge the professional. So we need to do a better job of recognizing the work that folks are doing. I love that Charisse is doing this.
love it too, because like I said, social workers don't get recognized for the work they do. And just as a little aside, and not for anything, but I was contacted randomly. I was so shocked by a group that looks for specialists in areas. When the Pit, I don't know if you're familiar with the Pit, it's a new ER drama that came out last year. And Noah Wiley is the lead on it. And they contacted me and said, we saw your resume and we would like you to be an advisor for the show for the social worker. And I was like, what? And again, I thought it was somebody like spamming me. So I actually Googled her name, and she actually, was a person who does this work through UCLA. And long story short, I ended up having the amazing opportunity when they were writing the first season to be the advisor for the social worker and social work type things. And it was just an incredible experience. And they said, what can we do for you? You've helped us tremendously. And I said, please show the scope of work that social workers in the emergency department do and that social workers do. We are not some little old lady with a bun, which they always do on TV, taking someone's child from them, even though unfortunately that, has happened, and it does happen, but when it's needed for safety. But that is not only what social workers do. And so if you have a chance to watch that show, it's on Netflix. Oh no, I'm sorry, it's on Prime. But they're going to have another season 2 starting, and I'm not as involved in that. I've gotten a couple requests to calls, but if you're a social worker, you will be proud to say they showed us in a good light and they showed us for real. And of course it's TV, so there's a few things that they did that I may have done differently, but I want everybody, if you haven't seen it, to go back and try to find it and watch it, because social work, I feel for the first time, is recognized as a profession that has a pretty wide scope of practice. So
I wish I could do my reaction button. It was a celebratory, like, yeah, wow, what an amazing experience to be an advisor
it
on a
was
national
yeah,
television show that's shown on Prime.
it
I
was
am blown away.
it was amazing.
Yes.
I really didn't think it was real when they asked. But I really I loved it. I loved the opportunity that I had to work with them, and the social worker truly in that show. Like I said, when you're a social worker in the emergency department, you are part of that team. It's different than even other floors in the hospital. You know, you're still part of a team, but in the ER, you're a boots on the ground, and they did a great job with that. So
And that was going to be my question. Did you think they did a good job? And it
I
sounds
did.
like they did. And so, yes, all social workers, we're about to run. Now that we know this, we're all
It's
going to run.
it's called The Pit.
Yes, and watch the. I'm going to put that in the podcast. I'm going to find the link and see if I can find a trailer or whatever and put that in your podcast description as well, because we are all going to go and watch that. So, one, thank you, because I
Yeah.
was thanking you for being a social worker who paved the way for us. And this is yet another area, another ray of sun that I'm seeing, that you're paving the way that we can be advisors on national seen television shows so that they can get it right. And I want to just thank the pit for
Yeah.
having the wherewithal to contact you so that they can get it right and it not be yet another stereotypical
Yeah.
showing of what people just assume social work is, but talk to a real social worker.
I have to give them credit. They did that for
Yeah.
every role on that
Mm.
show. And again, like they said, it's TV, so there's a little bit of, drama and things added, but honestly, it is the most realistic depiction. I know emergency physicians who watched the show and said they feel like they worked a shift afterwards. And actually, as a social worker who used to be in the ER, I felt like I get that. I felt like I worked a shift. Now, of course, it's TV, so and the idea of the show is that the entire, like, there's an episode, there's the season, but there's episodes. Every episode depicts 1 hour in the shift. So the entire season is one whole day. So
Wow.
yeah, so it's really
Wow, that is very cool. I cannot wait. Look, I'm going to tell you, my guilty pleasure has been watching with Wednesday Adams.
oh, I love that show.
I
I love
love
it.
her. She's
I
so
love it.
she's so great.
I've
I
been
love Wednesday Adams,
I do
but I'm gonna, season 2 just came out, and so I'm gonna put her on pause for me because I only get to watch one episode a night. But I'm gonna put her on pause, and I'm about to go find the pit.
Oh, you'll meet the social worker in the first episode.
I love this. I am so super, super, super excited. And that again, yet another thing that wasn't on your bio that I'm like, wow, what? And
Well,
again,
honestly, yeah, I didn't tell a lot of people about it because I didn't think they'd believe me, because
I
you don't get in the credits or anything, as a,
yes.
and you don't really get any compensation, but it's a wonderful opportunity. And
Mm.
for me, it was the joy of telling the social work story in a correct,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah, and that's exactly what we started this. I was like, I don't know why I want to ask you this, but what is bringing you joy? And the fact that you're saying that it's the joy in telling the story, because that's, again, you and I talked about this before we hit record, but the joy, I don't get compensated for doing this podcast, but I find so much joy in
Yeah.
talking to social workers about their stories and their journey. And that's what you're saying, was the joy of making sure social workers were depicted. And that is what being in love with this profession looks like. That's what being in love with this profession looks like. And so, again, thanking you for paving the way.
Oh,
For
it's been a journey, and I've loved every step of it.
yes, I love it. And you know, you said, and it was such a good segue to our next question, because I told you my favorite question is, what is a belief you once held about social work that has evolved or changed? And the fact that you were so intentional about making sure the scope of social work practice was depicted well on the pit. You know, I'm curious, and I'm also going to bring in, because I think it's so amazing that you did this, because I was part of a founding team that started an MSW program here in Alabama, and I've never really, you know, said it like that. But when I read, I was like, yeah, that's what I do too. But
A lot of
it is
kudos
a
to you.
lot of work. It is a
Yes.
lot of work to start it, to maintain it, all of that. And so, having started both the BSW and the MSW program, also to the point where now people are reading your resume and like, we want her to tell us about what it looks like to be a social worker. How, what belief systems about the professions have evolved or changed for you over the years?
Well, it's interesting because when I first was looking at those catalogs, right, and thinking about what do I want to do, and then I was going for my master's because I knew I wanted to work in the healthcare setting. I thought I would be doing that for the rest of my life, you know. And the thing I learned was, no, if you are a social worker, you have the gift and the skills to reinvent yourself as many times as you want to. That's the beauty of a degree in social work. And so, I mean, I have reinvented myself, even in my retirement job. You get to do that as a social worker because your background is so amazing. So start thinking, don't think small for the large view, right? You can think small for, okay, I'm going to this after this degree, but do what you love, follow your heart, and it'll take you in a very broad way.
Dr. Roth, I am so glad you said that. We kind of mentioned that a little bit, and it had hit me before we hit recorded that you had said that, because I was like, I don't know where this podcast came from. It's just I'm
You're
here,
reinventing yourself.
and
Yes.
I am reinventing myself again and again. And you're right. Over the years, you're doing new, and don't be afraid to
Right.
reinvent
Yeah,
yourself.
please, anybody listening, please don't be afraid. And if you love what you're doing, it's going to shine for you. And every single thing you do leads to the next thing. Back when I was in the ER, did I ever think somebody someday would call me and say, "Hey, can you advise us on the ER social worker role in this show?" Never, never did I expect that to happen. But every single thing you do builds on it and it makes you ready for the next thing. So you don't have to worry. You can reinvent yourself.
I love, and we're giving people permission to do that. And
Mhm.
reinvent yourself, but do it in a way that you're following your heart, and know that your skill set that you've learned as a social worker will hold the structure for your reinvention. So here, you know, like with the podcast, I'm just doing what I've been doing for the last 26 years, talking to
You were an
people.
example of reinventing yourself. Like you were like me, we started developing curriculum and doing accreditation for programs and all the things. And look at you, you're in this beautiful podcast room doing your podcast, doing what you love, you know?
Talking to people about social work. That's
That's
all I've
right.
done is talk to people about social work, and now I get to do it for fun. And yeah, I that was such a great answer. I so glad you said that. Reinvent yourself, y'all. We're giving you permission to do that. Oh my goodness, Dr. Roth. This has been such an amazing interview. It's such a surprise. I don't. I say this in almost every podcast. Such a surprise, such a joyful surprise of how beautiful and good it is. And I feel so honored just to be able to hold this space and hold the stories that so many amazing social workers are getting to share with so many people, including students, who are thinking about what are the possibilities for them within this profession. And yours is an amazing example. But before we leave, I have one last question, and it is for social workers who feel called to specialize in trauma and first responder care. And wondering what guidance would you offer? Are there any specific skills? We've talked a little bit about that, trainings, but I think maybe even leaning into mindsets that you
Yeah.
believe are essential for this particular type of work.
I honestly think if you want to do this type of work, you really need to, make sure that you have training and education in trauma, crisis, family, issues. But your own mindset should be open. Not just go into working in crisis and trauma to, I know you've heard this over and over again, especially in the book that you're reading now, but it's not what's wrong with that person. It's what happened to them, right? So go in with that mindset. When I have a first responder walk through the door, it would be easy to think, oh, this person's coming in because of a bad call, right? But often there's been a whole series of cumulative effect of bad calls that has started to spill over into their home life. And that's what brings them in. And it can be the bad call, but open your mind, be open, and ask yourself the question. It's not what's wrong. It's not the diagnosis that we have to give someone, right? It is, how is this impacting their life? What happened to them? And how can we work with that? So that is the most helpful thing that I have been able to do for
I
myself.
love, yes, and I love that. And I'm just gonna invite people. By the time your podcast episode is published, the book club will have already uh, met. But I do want to invite, because as I'm reading, Oprah is one of my teachers. She doesn't know it, but maybe she does. Maybe she knows she's a lot of people's teachers, but she's one of my teachers. I do want to invite people to read that book. I didn't pick it, one of the goddesses picked it. What Happened to You by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry. Even though I've been doing this work a long, long time, I am just loving how it's being framed and worded in this particular book. And if you are a social worker, you're working with people who have trauma, if you're working with children, if you're working with anybody, I feel like this is a book that we all should be reading. What Happened to You by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry, along with listening to Dr. Roth and some of the others talking to us about how to work with people with trauma. And so I want to just invite people to read that. I am going to probably record our book club meeting. And
Oh,
so if
awesome.
people do want to revisit it, they can come and join me on Circle. And I'll put that link in the podcast description. We have a Goddesses of Social Work Circle platform that we
Wow.
have open to social workers who are looking for community. And so I'll make sure that I put that link in our podcast description as well if you want to see the recording of our book club meeting. But Sheila, oh my goodness. Thank you so much for joining us today and for your dedication to healing and advocacy within the first responder community. Your work is a powerful reminder that supporting those who serve is one of the most sacred calls in social work. And if I can just say it again, thank you, thank you, thank you for the work that you're doing. And you absolutely deserved that swag award.
Oh,
You
well,
absolutely deserve that swag award. And so, to our listeners, if
thank you
you
for
want to,
having
you
me.
are welcome. If you want to connect with Dr. Roth or learn more about Roth Consulting and her trainings for first responder, we're going to make sure there's some links below. And we're going to remind you, go watch The Pit, and know that a real life social worker was the advisor. And I think that's pretty special. And as always, remember, you are the work and the work is you. And we'll see you next time on the Goddesses of Social Work podcast.